Hey guys, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are so glad that you're joining us today on how to use a client needs assessment to cross-sell effectively. I get to speak to this subject with passion because I get to love it, and live it every day. And so what we're going to do is just kind of roll through some of the results that we have experienced in our agency, myself personally, and then we're also going to just kind of walk through some tips and how to and some frequently asked questions. I think anytime you're doing anything out of the norm, something you're not comfortable with, it can be challenging that if I'm not comfortable with it, I don't think I'm really going to do it. So my goal in doing this little webinar today is just to hopefully knock down some of those hurdles that you have in your mind that make it uncomfortable to try something new. So we're going to roll through, get started, and definitely jot down your questions. And when we get done with this webinar towards the end, we will open it up to questions, and I am an open book and look forward to sharing as much as I can. So our agenda today looks like this. The agency results, I already kind of mentioned this, along with our my own personal production, just to hopefully establish some credibility to when we have established a client needs assessment, how it has impacted my life, my sales, as well as our agency here in Decatur, Illinois. Why I use the needs assessment, the approach, the psychology that goes into it, the effectiveness, that the client can see that it's not a one-size-fits-all, that you're truly taking in their information, and based on this information, we can make a rock-solid recommendation. Also on the agenda is just giving our tips and tricks, a lot of things, the order of operation, the verbiage that you use, all of that plays a part. So we'll highlight those tips, and then I'm going to kind of wrap us up. Right before questions, we're going to have a portion where we're going to talk about real life examples, and you'll see my own handwriting, if you can read it, of what a needs assessment looks like when it is completed. So we'll jump right into all of that fun stuff right now. Some of the systems that we've implemented have really helped, and at the top of the list of those systems has been using a client needs assessment. And so if you'll look at our agency results right here in Decatur, for the last 5 years, it looks like some pretty good growth. We all know what happened with COVID in there. And yes, I know that none of us, myself, none of us are nearly as impactful over the phone as we are in person. And so I think that contributed to 2021 being down a little bit. But I think most people are over that COVID scare and COVID craze, and now we're 2022 and things are really looking up. Did anything drastically change for us from 21 to 22? No, we're just back in front of people on a regular basis, working renewals, using a needs assessment, and good things are coming from that. Personally, looking at my own results over the last 5 years. Again, guys, this is not about, hey, look at my numbers, it's braggadocious. It's all about, hey, these are the benefits of using some of the systems that we are using. These are the benefits of using a client needs assessment specifically. So kind of some fun numbers to reflect on. I don't need to say this, but I'm one of those that I don't look at the numbers. Here we are setting up a webinar and I'm seeing some numbers and it's fun, but I'm all about put your head down, find a system that works, and just do your job every day. And then one day you get to do a webinar and here's some fun numbers to share. So that's the impacts of the needs assessment. When we use a client needs assessment, we're going to jump right into that. And we'll spend a little bit of time diving into each one of these bullets. Our agency, we were known as Medicare experts. We were MedSup agents. And so when we tried to start bringing about other products, a lot of people like, wow, I didn't know that you could do that. You can help with a 401k rollover too. Yeah, we can. And so the conversation is opened up just by the questions that are being asked on that needs assessment. That needs assessment is literally 10 questions that you're just using that as your outline or your roadmap for why I'm making a recommendation for somebody, instead of just trying to one size fits all. Everybody needs this, everybody needs that, and I tell everybody the same thing. Not the case at all. When you are selling specifically to the need, the client can see that. They can sort see that there's not just this baloney sales tactic, sales pitch that you have, where I'll just say, and I may be stealing some thunder down the road, but I know in the past, before using a needs assessment, I was passionate, fired up, ready to share the long-term care. And I started getting into a long-term care presentation, not really knowing how to strategically approach this, and come to find out they had no assets to protect. They didn't have the money to afford a long-term care policy, and they were just not a good client profile. They didn't have the profile necessary to recommend that product. And so I found getting away from just pitching product and saying, based on this needs assessment, based on this information, I would recommend, boom, I would recommend that. And they see right through it that it's not just throwing something at the wall and hoping that it sticks. So that's hitting on the highlights there. When we get into tips with the client needs assessment, I'm one that I'm like, I would rather talk about failures, what doesn't work, than be like, hey, look at me, this is how I do it. It's not like that. It's, hey, I've made a lot of mistakes and here's some things that I would recommend. When we talk about the needs assessment, you go through it, you've asked the questions, you understand their scenario. I highly recommend you start with asking, or start by saying, hey, we've reviewed your 24 Medicare Part D drug plans. You are already on the best plan. You know, you can only change that October 15th to December 7th. I would not recommend even considering looking at, even though you may have added a few drugs or taken away a few drugs, hang where you are. Just mark your calendar, October 15th to December 7th. We'll address that. You also have some life insurance. Life insurance in your scenario, in this scenario, is something that you bought at a much younger age. And if you were to purchase the exact same thing today, it would cost you a lot more money. So kudos on your life insurance, you're in good shape. Last but not least, you have, and I'm just making this up as I go, your Medicare supplement is with company XYZ, and you're in the most competitive place possible. So what are you doing? You're saying, hey, your drug plan's good, your life insurance is good, your health insurance is good, but there are a couple of things. So they're sitting there saying that you're not trying to just replace everything and sell them something new on everything that they have. Establishing some credibility to where when you do get ready to make a recommendation, they're kind of sitting back in a more relaxed posture, not guarded, not defensive, thinking they're just trying to sell me everything. So this is, you guys can read, but this is the script that pretty much is the outline of what it looks like after we've completed a needs assessment and we're transitioning into how do we address the needs. What do we address first? The needs that have already been met is what we would highlight there. So next tip is every client. And guys, three times I tried to get into using a needs assessment. It was not my norm. It's not the way I was trained. And so I had an old comfort zone, as we all do. And so 3 times I got away from it, and I just kept trying to come back to it, knowing that if I'm going to be preaching this to our own agency, I need to be practicing what I'm preaching. And so because of just kind of leading by example, I kept coming back to it. After the 3rd time, it stuck. And there's times that you feel like you know a client, you know their situation, and I probably don't need to fill out a needs assessment. Or maybe it might be awkward to do it because they've been a client for so many years and I've never asked them these questions. How am I going to just all of a sudden start asking them these questions now? I highly recommend every client doing that and then saving it to their record, which we're going to talk about that in just a second. Here is the fun part. When we do some training on a client needs assessment. A person is just practicing using a client needs assessment, practicing becoming familiar with the questions. They may call a neighbor, a family member, a friend, and say, hey, I'm doing some training. Can I do some role playing with you? And as they're doing role playing, they're uncovering needs. And I'm just going to pick on a cancer plan. They're ready to sell a cancer policy, and they're not even contracted. They don't even know how to price it, but the person that they're role playing with is now interested as a prospect. So I encourage you, prior to, we want to make sure that you have, you're fully equipped with the training necessary. Just keep going with cancer insurance. What company in your area is going to be most competitive? How do I get the pricing? What are my statistics? Just know your presentation, but then also make sure that you're contracted. Completing the entire needs assessment. Man, this one's kind of tough because when I started becoming comfortable with the needs assessment, you would see a need and I'd get all giddy inside, trying to have a poker face, being like, hey, I found a need I know I can help them with. And I would get ready to move into presentation mode, leaving out the bottom half of that needs assessment and finding it very difficult to come back to the rest of those questions after I've gone right into presentation mode. So before you get eager beaver, just go ahead and ask all the questions on the needs assessment. And then this is huge. If you are not comfortable, you won't do it. And so how do you become comfortable? Practice. Practice fun ideas. On your phone, record yourself, just your audio. You will be your own biggest critic. Get in front of a mirror, practice your presentation to memorize your statistics. Stare at yourself and it sounds silly, but it works. Last but not least, find a family member, a friend, anybody that you can get in front of and do the needs assessment. The more you do it, the more you feel like, oh, hey, they see that I'm not just trying to cram something down their throat, not just trying to sell something. I'm truly taking into account their needs with their situation and selling specifically to that need. So anyway, just do a lot of it to become comfortable. I'm going to go back real quick, Jay Bird. On that last piece, with those practice sessions, I would challenge you to set a goal that I'm going to do 10 client needs assessments, legit. And you're going to be intimidated as heck for the first 3, but just get through it. Practice a lot to make that easier. And then after you've done 10, I feel ever so confident that you will be way more comfortable and more likely to use that needs assessment. So that goal and that challenge is just do 10, make a little tally mark somewhere on a whiteboard or whatever you have, and go for 10. So there's my challenge. Over time, this client needs assessment evolves and the verbiage changes. Maybe the order of the questions might change slightly, or maybe we take something out. So on the top left here, you'll see how I'll just pick on question number 10. We used to ask, do you have any grandchildren? And talking about life insurance, and that really just didn't seem to fit really well. Now it's more so drilling in on, hey, any IRAs, any 401ks, are you satisfied with your current rate of return on your investments? We know that, anyway, I can go down that whole rabbit hole. So as time goes on, just make sure that you're updating yourself with the most recent needs assessment as 1, or 2, you are saying, hey, I can't say it the way John says it. I can't do it the way Michael says it. I can say it this way. So you change the verbiage of the needs assessment to fit you and roll with it if it makes you more comfortable. So don't be afraid to alter the needs assessment to fit your lingo. Continuing with some tips. Here's a big one, easier said than done. You may say, hey, I don't know everything about life insurance. I don't know everything about annuities. So maybe I just won't ask those 2 questions on the needs assessment. I'm here to tell you, ask the questions. for sure. And as you uncover the need, you can then call, and I'm going to pick on Kirk for a second. You can call Kirk right here in our office, and he's going to be able to say, oh my gosh, based on that information, we could recommend this, and it improves their situation in this way. So you don't have to be the annuity expert, the 401k expert, the life insurance, the long-term care. You don't have to be the expert to still ask the question. At that point of the game, you're just asking questions, gathering information. Filling out the needs assessment. Don't do it digitally. I'm somewhere stuck between old school and new school. You want that client to see that you are filling out a needs assessment specifically for them. Do it handwritten. Fill out as many details as you can on that. It'll just help you for reference for future appointments and such. And so do it by hand. There's a barrier. I'm getting on my soapbox here. There's a barrier with that computer screen in between you and I've got a laptop, and when I'm doing that needs assessment, I fold that baby down, and it's me and you interviewing, gathering as much information, and making a recommendation based on this information instead of putting it in digitally. Another thing, in sales, we only make money whenever we sell something. And so you see multiple needs and you want to be able to try and meet all of those needs. Unless it is your mom, don't tackle more than 2 needs at a time. Your mom is going to buy anything that you present to her. But if it's not your mom, anything over 2 needs is very, very overwhelming. So I would say something along these lines. Mrs. Jones, Mr. Jones, after reviewing your needs assessment, there are multiple needs that we can address. The ones that seem to have the greatest sense of urgency would be these. So we're going to tackle these today. But just know that whenever you come back to pick up your policy or whatever, we will address those other needs. You are just laying the groundwork that from day one, there are several things that we can help improve your situation with, and not make it feel like every time they come back in, you're trying to sell them something new. And so it is very, very important that as you've transitioned from your small talk to your needs assessment, and then you see all of the needs, that you share that little preface that there's going to be multiple needs, but we're only going to tackle a couple of them today. Let me stay on that for just a second. Generally speaking, we're taking care of the Medicare piece first. That usually has the greatest sense of urgency. And when that policy comes back in, passionate about this, don't mail it to them. Have them come in, you go see them, and that is your built-in follow-up. And I let them know, hey, when you come back in 2 weeks to get your policy, I want you to bring in your 401k statement. You know, that thing is riding the roller coaster. It's not in a safe place. We have some options that are going to be safe, guaranteed interest, no fees. You just planted the seed, they're bringing the statement, and on that delivery of that Medicare product is normally when we're doing the other needs. So that's how that we set the stage for cross-selling that way. Whatever your CRM is, save these. Save these. Don't go through a file. I know this sounds like old. Have that on your CRM, and right before a client comes in, I'm pulling up their needs assessment to say, hey, we've taken care of this need, this need, this need. This is the only one that we haven't addressed yet, and it is helpful. You may think in that moment, oh, I'll remember. You won't. So save those, scan those babies into your system, and save all of them. Here is how we are wrapping up, guys. We're wrapping up by using 2 real-life examples. If you can read my handwriting, this is what a needs assessment would look like. Here are the first 4 questions. It goes like this. Hey, Mrs. Jones, as we enter into, let me back up just a little bit. Ms. Jones, before I can make any recommendations for you, let me ask you a few questions. Hardest questions first. What's your birthday? And so we start with birth dates, phone number, such, and then we'll say, in the last 2 years, have you had any hospital stays, any surgeries? We're just trying to get them to open up and have a conversation. And then based on that information, usually, you know, after question number 1, hey, there may be a need for, a new med sup, improve their pricing. There may be a need for cancer insurance, but based on the last 2 years, they've just been treated for cancer. We're not writing them a cancer policy. We're not writing them a med sup, depending on their age and such. So anyway, it just tells you a lot if you ask number one, tell me about your health history in the last 2 years, any hospital stays, any surgeries. Number two, usually we're just asking, hey, do you have your Medicare card with you? We'll just verify their Part A and B effective dates, maybe jot down their Medicare number. Identifying on number three and number four what plan they have. Are they med sup or are they MA? And what are they paying for it? When do they get it? Normally not answering all of those questions, but just gathering their current situation. Based on your family history, have you had any cancer in your family? That number six, any experience with a family member going into a nursing home or receiving home health care. We're just gathering information. If they've had experience with a family member going into a nursing home and they know how doggone expensive it is, you don't have to create the need. They already know that there's a need. If they have no experience with it, then you've got to use some statistics to support why you would recommend it. Number seven, over time, things have changed a little bit on this life insurance question, but do you currently have life insurance? And quickly thereafter, you're saying, are you still paying premium? Okay, you are. How much are you paying? And then in this situation, if we find out that they've got a significant amount of cash value, or maybe their cash value is decreasing each year because the cost of insurance is going up and the projected interest rate didn't perform the way that was projected, we can a lot of times stop the bleeding and save that life insurance policy by converting it. Number nine is just going to get into final expense, or I'm sorry, 8, going to get into final expense. If they've done a prepaid funeral, if they've made any arrangements to know, do they have a small life insurance policy to take care of final expenses? When it gets to number 9, and I will say that we have altered number 10, are you satisfied with the current rate of return on your investments? This is just identifying, do you have any money? If so, is it in the bank or is it in the market? Where is it? Number 10, we now are sharing, do you have a 401k? Most of these working people that you and I are dealing with, they've not had a money manager, an Edward Jones, a Raymond James, and Morgan Stanley. They haven't. Most of them have not. They have this fat little chunk, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in a 401k that they've never touched. They've been afraid to for tax consequences. And you just so happen to be in the right place at the right time to be able to educate them on Medicare and all of that fun stuff, Social Security. And at the same time, hey, we can make some recommendations on some 401k rollovers that have 100% safety, guaranteed interest, and no fees. And so my point in all of that is when you're going through that questionnaire, you're not leaving anything out. And so when it comes time to making a solid recommendation, you have the big picture to be able to make that recommendation. We're going to hit on one more example, and then we're going to roll with questions, guys. Again, here, this one just looks a little bit different. Person had routine checkups, no hospital stays, no surgeries, blood pressure and cholesterol medication, identifying which drug plan they have. Number 4, identifying what med sup they have and what they're paying for it. Guys, I don't love my own examples because they don't have enough detail. I didn't label Mr. versus Mrs. So just my encouragement is to do better than what I'm doing on these 2 examples. And they are some older needs assessments. So I would like to tell you that I've gotten better at more detail. So yeah. And they have a history of cancer in their family. The mother had breast cancer, sister also. Any experience with a family member in a nursing home? No. Any arrangements? They've not made any arrangements for prepaid funeral or final expense insurance, and they have no life insurance. This is a fun one on question number 9. Are you satisfied with your current rate of return on investments? Yes. Just so you know, everybody's going to say yes. If they say no, if they're not satisfied with the current rate of return, they feel like they're opening the door wide open for you to recommend whatever well, because you're not satisfied with here I have a recommendation for you and you should follow it because you're not, they're going to say yes. That's fine. They're satisfied, but you want to identify, are you dealing with a stock market? Or are you dealing with a bank? In this case, they were dealing with Merrill Edge. I guess it's a version of Merrill Lynch, but it's not growing. So I just know that we're going to be talking about the safety and security of that money. Anyway, it's the roadmap. We know where we're going with that. And then I'm going to breeze past the grandchildren question. Any other slide? Okay, so here we are at the question and answer. I'm going to summarize all of that fun stuff and then hopefully answer as many questions as possible. Here's my summary. When it comes to systems, and we have several of them that we have adopted, and the client needs assessment is at the top because it helps you in your sales process. One, not leave money on the table. Two, sell specifically to the need. You could phrase it and say, oh, well, you're just finding an angle to sell more products. Well, if we're asking the right questions to understand the big picture, see the big picture, we can make rock solid recommendations, and the client, it's less salesy. It's not that used car salesman sales pitch. It's based on this information, I can recommend. And this is my close on that. Once you've ran the comparison, I encourage you to start with the drug piece. If you have someone who's getting ready to retire, start with Medicare Part D. Doctors, lawyers, engineers, they can't figure out Medicare Part D. And so if you walk them through based on your medications and your pharmacy of choice, here's 24 plans to choose from. Here's the one that saves you the most. They're going to follow that recommendation. You don't stop there. You go to the education on Medicare plans A through N and why I would recommend a plan G, maybe a Medicare Advantage, depending on where you live. And they're going to follow that recommendation. I'll use one more. By the time you get to, and I would recommend on your 401k to roll it over to secure it to where you can't lose anymore. It can only go in one direction, no fees and no risk. There's a trend here. They're following your recommendation on the drug piece. They're following your recommendation on the supplemental piece. They're following your recommendation. They're not going to stop as long as you continue to keep that same structure of based on this needs assessment, I would recommend. So that's my summary. Let's go to the first question. Will we get a copy of this webinar? Answer is yes. There will be a copy of the webinar.
Yep, we'll process the video, and once that's all done and uploaded, we will send that out probably tomorrow.
Great.
When you're meeting with a Medicare agent or a client, Medicare client, how do you ask or even begin to talk about these other questions on the assessment without them freaking and wanting to know why?
Yes. Love it. Love it. Love it. There is a warm-up that is very necessary that you guys already know well. It's very important in sales to have that warm-up. Here's the piece that allows you to not have a client freak out on asking these questions. It is, Ms. Jones, I've totally enjoyed getting to know you and your dog, your cat, and the whole 9 yards, your grandkids, and where you're going on your summer vacation. Before we can make any recommendations for anyone, we like to gather a little bit of information to better understand your situation. And so we're going to start by asking a few questions. Without that little preface, without that little transition, it's really, really difficult not to feel like, oh my gosh, why are they asking these questions if I'm the prospect? And so if you have that little preface in there, it will help them answer. This question is like the number one question when we're doing training and people say, how do I know my prospects or clients are going to answer these questions? They will answer the questions. In the last 5 years, I've had one person say, I don't feel comfortable sharing all that information. By the time we got done with that appointment, I did share with that lady, this happened 2 weeks ago, I did share with that lady the reason why we asked these questions. I think this is pertaining to a financial situation. The reason why we ask these questions is the more information that we have, the more confident I can feel about making a recommendation for you. You know, some people don't have assets to protect. Therefore, they don't need long-term care. I don't want to recommend long-term care for you if you don't have assets to protect. And that's why. And she came around to answering those questions. But in the last 5 years, it's the only time I've had someone not answer those questions, not freak out.
So we have a related one. What's a good response to, I only want to talk about Medicare today?
Great. Today, Medicare is the high priority. It is the one that has the greatest sense of urgency, and that is wonderful. I want you to be a sponge today. I want you to gather as much information. We don't have to make any decisions, but it is a big topic. Let's talk about Medicare first. I'm going to go ahead and gather the rest of the information. So I understand the question 100%, but it's not realistic that a person's going to say, I'm not talking about that. You're just saying, with your preface, I want to gather a little bit of information before I can make any recommendations for you. It'll help us see the big picture. So based on that information, now I can make recommendations. So the scariness of doing this new needs assessment that we've not done before does have a lot of these questions, and that's why we're addressing them, that intimidates you from ever starting. And I'm here to tell you, I hope you guys are all okay with this. If it's something that's not realistic, I will just tell you, I've never had that question. I've never had that freak out moment. And so don't psych ourselves out because it's not realistic. So I will just keep coming on the questions, but the frequently asked questions are ones that I will help you guys kind of address those.
Okay, I think this is in reference to when you were talking about being face-to-face. Belinda asks, if you're licensed in 26 states, maybe Zoom and share your screen.
I love the idea of Zoom. I can't even take credit. The referrals that I get that are from far away, a lot of times they're requesting the Zoom and it works out beautifully. And so highly recommend Zoom. It definitely has a more personal touch to it. They're more likely to reveal more information. It is difficult, just flat out. It's very difficult to roll over a 401k all over the phone and they never see you on camera or in person. So the on camera has definitely helped with that kind of stuff. So I love the idea of Zoom and sharing your screen.
Okay, Lewis, when you go back to the client to take their plan based on their CNA, if we discover they have a need for final expense plan, what would be a good comment to mention to them prior to arriving that would have them open to going over final expense plans?
I love it. I don't know that there's anything that needs to be done prior. It is very common that a person will say, gosh, I wasn't really prepared with all that. They have life insurance already. They don't know their cash value. They may not even remember their current premium. That's fine. Some of this information, Mrs. Jones, I'll give you a little homework assignment and we will gather this information later. But in order to have, again, the big picture, to see the big picture, we'll gather that information in time. Nothing needs to be done prior to. I know it feels like, gosh, if I can have them mentally prepared for some of the things that we're going to be talking about, maybe I can give them this little checklist. And I'm not saying you can't. It's not necessary because you will be able to approach it just by starting with needs assessment and education.
Okay, can you give us examples of how you use the last two questions to uncover assets during needs analysis? Somebody says, yes, I'm happy with my current rate of return. How do you drill down to get them to open to discuss safe money? And when you do address it, or when do you address it? And what objections do you commonly get rid of and when?
Okay, a lot of questions there. We're just going to hit on how that needs assessment has evolved. Now, something that helps eliminate some of the hurdles is I start by, do you have any IRAs or any 401ks? Okay. And you just got to be comfortable with sitting there and say, yeah, letting them talk. And they say, yeah, I've got this, I've got that. And I'll say, and any other investments. Cool. So they have that. I don't necessarily regularly ask any longer, are you satisfied with your current rate of return on investments? For like 5 years, that's how I asked it. Now I feel it's a little bit better to say any IRAs or 401ks and any other investments. If they say, to answer your question specifically, if they say, yeah, I'm satisfied, great, that's fantastic. Are you dealing with a stock market or are you dealing with a bank? Because then you know which road you're going to go down. Banks offer a lot of safety, not offering enough interest. That's starting to change slightly. And if you're dealing with the market, you're dealing with volatility. And so we get to talk about safety and so on and so forth. So that kind of encompasses that question, I think, quite a bit. Just drilling down on that, I think prior to the needs assessment, that was the thing I was like, how do I know they're going to answer these questions? Are they really going to tell me that they got $2.5 million in retirement assets? Yeah, they're going to tell you. And then you get to say, hey, based on this recommended, I've said it 100 times, based on this needs assessment, I would recommend safety. And then here are several options. Let's follow up with, let's keep going on this. I love this one. Mrs. Jones, there's really only 2 questions that I need to ask to make sure that there are umpteen products to choose from on the financial side, to make sure that it's not a one size fits all, to make sure that we're not just throwing a shot in the dark here. There are only 2 questions I have for you. When do you plan to use that money? And how much do you plan to use at that time? Based on that, I can match a product to their need, because I know when they're going to start drawing money out of this, and I know how much they're going to need. If there's a plan that only has a 5% free withdrawal and they need 10, well, that 5% free withdrawal plan's out the window and I'm going to the 10% free withdrawal.
Okay, Gary, insurance agents, we're always looking for the next best sales system, but it's a return to the basics that yields the best results. Can I contact your agency offline?
Yes, absolutely. Just a quick commercial for Kirk. And Kirk, I'm going to reference him. He's right on the other side of this wall. Kirk handles the life insurance and annuity department. I am in sales every day. He helps support agents who are running across prospects that need help with life insurance, annuity, so on and so forth. And so just get to know Kirk. If you have any questions, you say, hey, Kirk, I did a needs assessment. I uncovered that these people have $50,000 sitting in a CD earning nothing, and it's getting ready to mature. Or, hey, I just asked the question and I have somebody that has a 401k. They are losing their rear and they want to secure it so they can no longer lose. What would you recommend? Kirk's going to say, when do they plan to use the money? How much they plan to use? Based on that information, we can help you fit a product. And so when back in the slideshow of the webinar, we were talking about relying on a team. In our office, if you have Medicare Advantage questions, Steve he eats, sleeps, and breathes MA. Life and annuity, Kirk eats. Anyway, we've got a team member designated for each subject topic, that they are experts in that field, and you don't have to be. So you just have to ask the right questions and then we'll direct you to the right person to help maximize that opportunity with that prospect.
Okay, Ed, instead of telling a client what is most important to address now, wouldn't it be better to ask what they're most concerned with?
I love that. I really love that. I was trained in that way, Ed. I love it. To say, hey, here are the areas of concern. Which one concerns you the most was the exact verbiage. And I a lot of times got the deer in the headlights, like, I don't know, So it left very uncomfortable. They would take a lead role and say, yeah, I'm really worried about the safety of my money. They just wouldn't. And so as the experts, I'm saying you're the expert. I'm supposed to be the expert. Hard to call yourself an expert. We get to make recommendations. And I believe it with all of my heart. After reviewing a needs assessment and gathering as much information as possible, I feel ever so confident to be able to say, this need has the greatest sense of urgency, and we're going to address this first. Once that policy comes in, we will address another need. So I love the question. There's nothing wrong with that approach. It has not worked well for me.
Okay, is it compliant to ask them all these questions when you're there for a Medicare meeting?
It is, fact finding is compliant. When we talk about Medicare Advantage and all the red tape that goes with it, what you're able to do at that time, yes, you have some scope of appointment, you have all of that, and what it may be a separate meeting, but in order to fact find and gather information on a client to be able to make recommendations, you are compliant.
Okay, somebody says, I have 500,000 in a 401k. When do you go after that opportunity and get them open to talking about it? It's easy to get them to tell you they have it, but another to get them open to reviewing it, in my experience, especially when they approach the meeting only for Medicare assistance.
I love the question. I don't know who the question is, but it's the best question thus far. No offense to anybody else. When we're doing the needs assessment and we've taken care of the Medicare piece, the Part D, the education, Plan G, Med Sup versus MA, all of that. And then we get down to, we're saying, hey, we're going to take care of this maybe today or with time, but here is what I would recommend. When you and your employer are no longer contributing to that retirement account, it would be my recommendation for you to roll it over. And when we talk about a rollover, you really have three options. You have the market, very volatile. You have the banks, safe, not offering enough interest. We have guaranteed contracts that offer great rates, no fees, no risk. And so when we evaluate those three options for a rollover, we get to lay them side by side and make the recommendation which one's going to work best for you. I just have to know, when do you plan to use and how much do you plan to use at that time? When do you plan to use this money? So Mrs. Jones, do you know that as soon as you retire that you're going to need to supplement your monthly income to help maintain the standard of living that you're used to? No, I don't think that I need to start. Well, now it used to be age 70 and a half, then it went to age 72. Now it's age 73 that you have to start taking out your RMD. Do you think that you will take out before you're required to? No, I just don't see that we're going to need it. Well, that tells us a lot when we know when they plan to use it and how much they plan to use. And then if you don't, I'm going to talk about fishing versus making a recommendation. If you don't start fishing for, well, I tell you what, we could really help you out with that, and you start fishing. No, you're staying the same way as your Medicare Part D recommendation out of 24 plans after running your needs assessment or your Part D comparison. This is what I would recommend. The other 23 would only cost you more money. So that's why I'd recommend this. On your Medicare piece, this is what I would recommend. Boom. And on this, I would recommend a rollover, and I would recommend the greatest safety. We'll start with the highest interest offering, and it has a 5% free withdrawal. If that is not sufficient for you, we can go to a plan that has a greater free withdrawal, but they're not offering as much interest. So we'll just see which one works out the best for you. But when you make that rock solid recommendation, they're going to follow it. And it's intimidating to get into something that we're not currently doing, but there's only one way to get better at it, is just keep plugging away. So I love that question.
Okay, can you legally say an annuity has no fees?
That's a great question. I don't know that it is. I've never had this question. I'm pretty certain, fixed annuity, we absolutely know that there's no fees. The fixed indexed annuities that we don't offer. Let me back up. I'm in love with SILAC. Maybe I'm not supposed to give a commercial right now. SILAC, they have a handful of products that have no fees. And I love being able to say no fees. So when I'm talking, I know what I'm referencing and I know that there are no fees. And so that's a great question. Belinda, we may get back with you to get a little more clarity on that. But I would say with 95% confidence, we can say that there are no fees, because there are not.
Yeah, someone else said if it has no fees, then yes.
Love it. Love it. Guys, I'm wrapping us up. Thank you so much for joining. You're going to have questions. You're going to run into some hurdles you're going to be a hair intimidated, call us, reach out, say, hey, Michael, whenever you've encountered this type of objection or hurdle, how did you? And I will be happy to help out. I don't know everything, but we've been doing this system long enough that I feel like we've run into a lot of repeats, and we know what the frequently asked questions are going to be and know how to overcome those challenges and those hurdles. So thanks for attending. Don't hesitate to reach out. You see the number on the screen, and you guys have a great day.